And as we enter into part 3 of our teaching series, it might be time to make a few things explicitly clear. That the goal of this teaching series isn't to transform you into the next David Suzuki or Greta Thunberg. It's not the goal. Though a Beachcombers reboot might be kind of cool. And if you don't know what the Beachcombers is, you missed some great heartwarming Canadian television in the 1980s. Now, this series, the intention here is not to force you to pick sides. In the next election, if you vote right, great. If you vote left, great. We can still be friends. We can still be in community together. And also, the goal of this series isn't to shame you. Oh my goodness, I'm not doing good enough. Or to give you the impression that you're better than others. Oh, look at me. I'm doing way better than the next guy. That's not the point, because that's not helpful for anyone. Instead, the overarching goal of this series is to remind us that we belong to God and that this world belongs to God. So the way that we operate must fit into God's designs for this world. And that impacts everything we do, not just this 1 hour we spend together on Sundays, but how we drive and how we eat and what we buy, etc. Because all of those things need to fit into God's bigger picture. Because living in harmony with one another and with this world is part of what it means to be fully human. And that is why I am so excited today to have Sister Judy with us. Judy teaches workshops and retreats on ecological spirituality and eco-justice. And the reason that I've invited her to be with us here today is to expand our minds and expand our hearts a little bit. To see this world perhaps in a different way. And to see our place in it. And I've also asked her maybe to fill in some of the gaps too and say, remind us how the church has talked about creation over the last 1,000 years. And like I said last week, Judy is the coolest nun I have ever met in my entire life. So can you give it up for Judy this morning? Welcome, Judy. So glad you're here. A couple of quick things before we roll in. We want to include you in this conversation. So if you have questions at any time, you can participate by texting the number in the left-hand part of the screen. And also, please be aware that the interview that we're about to have here together is loosely based on a presentation that Judy gives. And usually when you give that presentation, it takes 2 hours or more, right? But we have shrunk it down. We're going to hit all the highlights. We're going to do some Q&R, and we're going to have some lively banter within 30 or 35 minutes. We can do this, right?
Yes.
Miracle. Yes, it'll be a miracle, but we can do it. All right, so let's kick things off this way. So we've been into this series. We've been talking about creation care. And I want you to lead us in here and help us understand this idea of hierarchy. Help us understand the values that we place on the created order that really influence how we look after creation. So lead us in there.
Okay. Thank you. And it's wonderful to be here. Anyway, about this hierarchy. You know, hierarchy simply means things have been ranked throughout history. And so creation, we'll have to look and see where it is. Mostly it's been kings and queens and down the line. And so let's take a look at where we were greatly influenced. And it was the 17th century Greek philosophy that came up with these definitions. And so you'll see on the screen here that things have been divided into spirit and matter. And spirit had to do with all things permanent, like your soul, your being, as well as permanence. Matter, on the other side, was all things physical, like our bodies, passion, emotion, and it changes. And then they were ranked. One was superior, the other was inferior. One was a subject, the other was object. So just look at the list that we've done. Our mind is superior to our bodies. Men superior to women. Master to slave. Order to chaos. The rational mind is more important than the intuitive mind. The Christian to the pagan, heaven to earth, civilized barbarian, sacred and secular, science and religion. And so we're trying to say that these two mesh together. Look what it says. They're two sides of the same coin. What we measure is matter. What we feel is spirit. So they go together. Matter comes to life through spirit. Spirit comes through matter. And so these are the ways that we have divided the world up. You could add a whole bunch more. The rich, the poor, the white class, the other people. So we've divided the world up, and I like to tell the story of the prodigal son. Jesus told that story of the father who had two sons. The youngest one says, hey, I'm out of here. Give me your estate, half the estate. After you die, give it to me now. Off he goes and lives and thrives until his money's gone. And the other son is at home taking care of the farm. And so what happens? Hard times hit. He's run out of money. He's a Jewish boy. He's feeding pigs, which is something they don't like to do. And the food, he was saying the foods they were getting was something that he could eat. And he thought, my God, at home the hired men get better food than I do here. I'm going to go home and say, I'm sorry, Dad, let me be a hired man. So he trudges home, and his dad sees him and embraces him. Meanwhile, the son in the field saying, where's that twit of a brother? He was supposed to be helping me, and here he's not. And now he's come home, and they want to kill the fatted calf? What gives? You didn't give one for me. So we ask ourselves, and priests and ministers have asked, who am I? Am I the young son, or am I the other son? And I want to say we are both. There are times when I waste my time and talent, run recklessly over things or life, and there are times when I am judgmental, critical, and entitled. I deserve that fatted calf. The Father loved both of them. And so it's not either or. We like to say it's both and. And so that's a factor that we're going to hear time and time again throughout our presentation.
And I think sometimes we've taken that idea of just separating pieces, and we've actually applied that to us and to God. So maybe walk us through this next bit of content in how, we have perceived ourselves in light of who God is.
All right. Well, we see ourselves as basically the whole relationship being with God and ourselves and each other. And the earth, well, we're just walking on it, and it's not an integral part of things. Western economics and law and ethics function out of that. What's important is humanity, and are we living our relationship with God, and nothing with regard to the earth. We can do whatever we want with it. And of course, we've done. Morality has been concerned with human behavior toward God and each other. Treatment of the earth has not generally been considered a moral issue. And so that's another stream of how we've been living for the last 200, 300, 400 years.
And that's really infected how we've approached the earth, how we've approached one another, and even how we see God. And remember this image, because we have a diagram coming up that will just change perhaps offer a better way to see ourselves in this world. But before that, one more. And when you first showed me this image, it kind of blew me away, and that's why I wanted to share it with you here this morning. And let me be honest, before I'd met Judy, usually when I meet somebody new, I'm like, let's go to a fancy coffee shop. I'll buy you a $9 coffee. You'll see how cool I am. So I said, hey, Judy, where can I meet you? And she says, why don't you just come to my house? I'm like, okay. And then she offered me tea and cookies. It was really nice. And when you first showed me this, it kind of blew me away. So unpack this Western hierarchy of values for us.
Yes, this is very vital, and I hope you can keep this in your mind, because this is really, truly what we have been operating out. And so let's just look at what we've got written. This, we believed, was the way God set things up in the beginning and intended to remain. That God was male, men were superior to women, the children were more important, male children were more important than female, animals were above the plants, plants were above insects, worms, and bacteria, and at the bottom were the rocks and the elements of earth. And so again, we have this rank order, this hierarchy. And of course, today we know in society, the women's issues are being raised. We're talking about the fact that women make 87 cents to the dollar. So there's a breakdown. We're wanting to break through and say, hey, we've got equal talents. Why are we not being treated the same way? And so Earth has to be looked at the same way. How are we treating Earth? Is it really the bottom of the ladder and that we can do whatever we want with it? Well, we're going to explore some of that.
Because that really does affect it, right? Because if we see the earth, creation, at the bottom of this ladder, then you're right, I can do whatever I want to it. But creation is so much grander than that. So why don't we back things up a little bit? In fact, let's back it up 13.7 billion years and help give us a wider picture. Because I think what Judy's going to do for us here these next few moments is this. She's going to give us this bigger picture of things. Because usually for you and I, at least for me, in my world, my face is usually in my phone. Or I'm thinking about what I have to do tomorrow. Or I got to get supper on the table for the kids. But when we see this bigger view of creation, God's part in it, and his invitation for us to be a part of it, it might change how we operate. So bring us back.
Well, we'll go back, but before we go all the way back, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Galileo and Copernicus. That, they had, probably just newly discovered telescopes, and, they put it up to the sky and expected to see the stars, but lo and behold, they found out that we were on an axis rotating around the sun, and not only us, but several other planets. And it blew their minds with delight and surprise because, and the church condemned these teachings. Why? Because our thinking at the time was that the earth was the only thing in space. And God created it, and that's what it is. And look at the surprise, all these planets. And so science revealed something that our faith needed to embrace and break open. And so I'm saying the same thing now. In the last 100, 150 years, science has been telling us a few more things that is going to be opening our understanding of creation and of God and of our place in it. And so we begin with our story here, and we call it God's story. And it's a story that not only Christians can embrace, but all the world. And that's beautiful. Again, it's a sense of our oneness. So this flaring forth image that you see there began with a tiny little pinprick speck of power and energy of nucleus, and it exploded. And the scientists call it the Big Bang. And other scientists call it the flaring forth of light and energy and fecundity and power. And the light for us, it was bathed in light, and that's our expression of the divine. God was present, came from the heart of God. Spirit and matter were linked. And so the unfolding happened. It took years for all these chemicals and wonders, neutrons and whatever else, to come together. And they created hydrogen and helium. And then they found each other, and they created stars. And these stars lived for millions of years. And when they died, especially the big ones, there was a supernova, which means that a big, long, they say, week, 10 days of burning up. And inside of that, it cooked up all the elements for future life, like iron, magnesium, zinc, copper, uranium, tungsten, all these elements that would eventually become are part of our future. And so with time, they came together and they collected and gathered, and what did we get? There it is. It took 4.5 billion years when this emerged, but we started with 13.7. So you see, God's work is slow, methodical, beautiful, unfolding. The universe began, and now we have our earth, and it's water and life and land, and below what emerged was the beginning of life. The simple cells developed and grew, and we have life. Plants grew, they captured sunlight, producing air, and the fish arrived around 4 billion years ago. 500 million years for the earth to come to life and allow the earliest elements to emerge. And so, following that, we have another major shift in our unfolding. The dinosaurs emerged 235 million years, along with plants and trees and the environment needed for them. And so they were there, and then an asteroid hit them 65 million years ago, somewhere around Mexico area. So they ended, but God had another surprise. There was another quantum leap. Each time after the era of fish, came the quantum leap, the dinosaurs, now comes the quantum leap of mammals. And so the simple mammals emerged out of the trees, the little guy over there, and then the monkeys 36 million years ago, the deer 19, the elephant 7 million years. There are many other animals, but time is short here, so we're keeping it to it. So this is their unfolding. Life becomes more complex. And so, to our surprise, we have the next gift. God created humans, and they emerged out of Africa about 7 million years ago. They learned to have to use tools, discover fire, and hunting and gathering. And so life has become more complex. And that's our story, our history of how we began.
So then, if that is true, then there needs to be a better way for understanding ourselves in this world. And it can't be that separate. God is away in the clouds, and we're here tied to the earth, and the earth really is something for us to use. And it really can't be that hierarchy piece where one thing is owning the next. So maybe unpack this diagram for us and perhaps give us a better way to understand God and creation and our part in it.
All right. So we see that God is present there, and of course the diagram is conveying God surrounding us. And it's not only surrounding us on the outside, it could be in the inside too. And so the unfolding, God's plan was the universe, and of course from the universe came the stars, the planets, fish life, animal life, and eventually us. And God is present there within that unfolding and beyond. It's not either or. God was only there or only here. No, he was both and. And it's said there, God is intimately revealed in the diversity of creation, yet infinitely more than all of creation. Do you see that dualism coming or hitting on? Good.
So then take it further then here. And when this sort of unpacks that last diagram further, because again, it helps us to see and understand that God is everywhere. Everything is in God. So maybe take it a step further for us here in terms of time and complexity.
Well, we see there, God is planted within the whole unfolding, and that is what's so beautiful. And so I have, from Michael Dowd, points that he made this diagram, and he explains it. He says, everything is changing, and we are part of that developmental universe. As time continues, it becomes more complex. God is seen as both transcendent and immanent within. Everything that makes up the earth is a revelation of God and necessary for the healthy functioning of the universe. And we humans have no existence outside of these ecological cycles of Earth. Earth has no existence outside of the universe. The universe has no existence outside of God. Everything is totally interrelated and interdependent. It's a circle, not a triangle of power over, but cooperation, power with, power shared. So we have no existence apart from this living earth, and what we do to the earth, we're doing to ourselves. That's a big thought, because we think the earth is down there, and it is down there, but only under our feet, but in our hearts, it's one with us. We come from the earth.
So now let's put a pin in that. Just hold that for a second here, and let's fast forward to the church. And there have been voices from the church over the last 10 centuries or more that have given us a sense of how to approach this world with awe and reverence. So I'm going to read one of the quotes, and I'm just going to have you comment on it. We'll do that two or three times, all right? All right, so let's go right here. So Hildegard, way back, 1098 to 1179, the whole world is imbued with the love of God. What is she talking about?
Well, Hildegard, just to know, she's from the Rhineland. She was a musician, a mystic, and artist. And you see, that's her artwork there, revealing the oneness of God with all of us. And so she says the whole world, if it's unfolding, as we have just shared, is full of God. imbued with the love of God. And so she goes on to say, earth is the mother of all nature. She's the mother of all that is human. Without the earth, we wouldn't be around, nor would the plants and the animals. She's the mother of all, for contained in her are the seeds of all. Generally speaking, we've all come from that.
One other one? St. Francis says, the heavens are telling of the glory of God, and all creation is shouting for joy. And before you hop into that, just a quick history lesson here, right? We are in a Free Methodist church. Some of us may identify as Free Methodists. Others of us have arrived here from different faith and Christian traditions, right? One thing we need to remember, though, that up until about 500 years ago or so, we were all Catholics. You know that, right? Like, that's been part of the story. So these voices, even though they might be they seem different to us today, these are a part of our voices. And maybe that's one of the reasons I have you, my Catholic sister, sitting here on the stage with me. My goodness, a Catholic on stage with a Free Methodist pastor? Who ever thought? So unpack this for us.
Part of the evolution, boy.
Maybe it is, right? Hey, you want to get some? You guys want to get? You want to get? That was good, right? You want to get some tea and crackers later? Maybe you and I,
Yeah.
Maybe we'll do that, right? All right, let's get back on track here.
Coffee.
Let's get back on track here, Judy.
Yes.
So St. Francis,
Okay.
what is he talking about when he's saying that all creation is shouting for joy?
Okay, Francis was a son of a rich merchant. He was a rich kid. He blew his wad, and then he went into the army, got injured, came back, and during his healing time in the hospital, he realized, hey, I guess maybe accidents and like this turn us to God. And he began to realize, hey, I want to be a warrior for God. So in that sense, he started out and he was praying and walking. And those days you did a lot of walking. There were no cars. So he spent time out in nature, walking from church to church in communities. And he began to awaken that, hey, all of this is God's creation, God's gift. And so with his prayerful stance and his desire to be a warrior for God, something happened. The mystic, they begin to grasp that all of this is one, God's gift. And so he could come out and recognize all beings as kin, as family, belonging to the family of God. And so he wrote up this canticle of St. Francis, and he talks about brother sun who shines down on us, father sky, sister water, Mother Earth. He uses family terms for all of creation. Again, affirming the sense that we are connected. We come from the hand and the heart of God.
Again, the connectedness of all of it. One more here quick.
Oh, yeah.
Meister Eckhart says that every creature is full of God and is a book about God. What does that mean?
Meister Eckhart came from the same area where Hildegard came, but was much later. But he, too, had a befriended nature in such a way in this whole understanding that it all comes from God. And so in creation, when he saw beings together, he said, hey, they're reflecting God. I could write a book about it. And just look at the pictures of the nurturing fish and the playfulness of the bears, and then the protectiveness of the mother hen. We all have pets, and you could probably write a paragraph or two. What about taking the eyes of Master Eckhart and say, hey, what does each of these creatures reflect of God? It's another word of pulling them in to recognize they're not below us, they're our family, just like Francis said.
So now, again, the hard question might be is how that actually translates into our world. So let's fast forward a few centuries. The Industrial Revolution hits. It changes the course of human history. It changes how we interact with our world. So we're going to share a few more quotes here real quick by Father Thomas Berry, who is part theologian, part geologian, right? That's what he called himself.
He speaks on behalf of the earth.
Absolutely. So I'm going to read a quote, and I'm going to have you comment on it. Again, this is bringing it up to speed another few hundred years. He starts by saying this: the universe is seen as a collection of objects to be exploited rather than a subject to be communed with. It was a move from organic agricultural to industrial extractive, non-renewing economy based on limited resources. What's he talking about there?
Well, again, we're going back to that dualism. we saw that Earth can be considered an object rather than a subject. And so that's what he's saying. We've treated the Earth as an object. And when things are an object, you just take and use and throw away, and, it's there, but there's nothing sacred to it. It is to be communed with, our natural world. And for many of us, we enjoy going out to the lake for a week, or, oh, it's so nice to be with nature, or guys with golfing, they love it. But we have to develop this. This is the new call for us today, that scientists are revealing the awe and wonder of creation, and we want to say, yes, the awe and wonder of creation in our Christian faith and in our life. And so that's what he's saying. We've exploited the earth. We've gone in and dug it out and wrestled it with it and taken things as if it were an object, instead of, yes, we need to take the earth. And the First Nations were wonderful. They used to say when they went hunting and they needed meat, they asked the permission from the moose before they shot it. It's that attitude, that it's gift.
Let's take it a step further then. He continues by saying that one of the difficulties is the discontinuity between humans and non-humans, with rights going only to the human jurisprudence. It is a use relationship, not a communion relationship. Speak to that.
Well, it's much like what I was saying. If we treat things like an object, it's there for our use. We can pick it up, use it, throw it away. Pick it up, use it, throw away. It's not a communion, not recognizing that sacredness, like I said, of the First Nations, where they ask permission. Not that we're asked to do that, but just to recognize everything is gift. We had a First Nations fellow come and talk in our parish at our luncheon, and he said, we need the air, but the air doesn't need us. We need the sun, but the sun doesn't need us. We need water. The water doesn't need us. We need the soil of the earth, but the soil doesn't need us. So everything is gift, my friends. And to recognize that, to reclaim that really calls for a shift in our consciousness. It's not a thing, it's to be honored and be grateful for it, and it's sacred. All of it is sacred.
So good. One more. The universe is the primary university. Primary scientist, lawgiver, teacher, healer, revelation of the divine, artist, model of economic cooperation, model of earthly affairs, and educating us for the Ecozoic era, the era of oneness.
Mm-hmm. Well, we go back. Remember, the universe began 13.7 billion years ago, and we've come along 7 million years ago. So Thomas Berry says we need to go to the university and study and learn. And before I go into that, I want to just tell you the story. Supposing we take the 13.7 billion years and down to today and put it into 1 year. And listen to how it starts. January the 1st was the flaring forth. The Milky Way galaxy organized in late February. Our solar system emerged from an elemental stardust in early September. The planetary oceans formed in late September. The Earth awakened into life in early October. Sex was invented in late November. The dinosaurs lived for a few days in early December. Flowering plants burst upon the scene with dazzling array and color in mid-December. And the universe began reflecting consciously through the human with choice and free will less than 10 minutes before midnight on December 31st. We're 10 minutes old, folks. Isn't that something? It gives us perspective. So, who has been keeping order and law and functioning? It's the universe. So we need to go to the universe to see and study. But we think we can assess and judge, and we've had calamities because we don't know the rules of the universe. I love this here. It's the primary revelation of the divine, lawgiver, scientist, teacher, model of economic cooperation, not domination. So that's the model that it's been doing so that it could thrive and survive. It's a model of earthly affairs, calling us to an era of oneness. This whole story is calling us to oneness, to cooperation, not separation, like we said in the dualistic world. It's a huge shift in our thinking. And so, I think I said it.
I think you did. I think you've done a beautiful job over the last 25 minutes or so, just giving us, a bigger picture of being able to see ourselves in something far greater than what's before us in this moment. But in your last thoughts here, I would ask for your help. So we've seen this story from 13.7 billion years ago. We've seen the church talk about it. We talked a bit about the Industrial Revolution. But what about us for here today? How would you encourage us as a church, as parents, as individuals, as workers? How would you encourage us to engage with creation, remembering the oneness of all creation? What would you say to us to actually live out God's dreams for this world?
That's a big question, and that's going to be the question for us to live, into. And that it begins with small steps. It starts with our heart and with the human realization that we are not the top of the pinnacle. We are part of this community. And so we want to ponder that. Take some time to walk in nature. Keep the headsets and all that stuff at home. Just walk in nature. And I'll tell you a story. When I was writing my master's in this stuff, I was so frustrated. My paper wasn't coming together, and the deadline was there, and I had to type it, and blah, blah, blah. And so I said, well, I'm going to go and get a Snickers. When you get tired, I need a Snickers. And it's just a block or two away. So I went, but on the way up, somewhere, I woke up, and there was the park. I said, well, I'll go walk off what I'm going to eat. Well, I went into the park, and there were swans and the water, and they were playing, and they had their two heads together in the shape of a heart. I sat there and watched them. Then some others came along, and there were flowers and other birds and just an array of things. I just calmed right down. And I went home. No Snickers bar. I went home, and I wrote. I was inspired. A walk in nature walks your soul back home. And so that's what happened. So, did I answer your question, or I got off on a tangent here?
Well, yeah, we said about,
yes.
Practically, right? So
Yes.
spending
Walks
time in nature. Yeah, and the last
Yes.
piece.
And another thing is, what are we doing with our clothes, particularly jeans? If you saw that CBC documentary, they said the second polluting factor of our planet, beyond gas and oil, is our clothing industry, because they use gobs of water and poison dyes that poisons the water, and no life can live. The fish and everything else have died. We wear clothes, we wear something for 6 months and throw it out. It's that whole attitude of object use. Come to respect. Where does it come from? What does it cost the earth to have that made? Also, you can write letters to the government with regard to protecting forests, no factory farms, chemicals and plastics in the waters. At home, you can watch your food and your wastage of it. They say we waste so much food. Composting, recycling, using cloth bags for shopping, eliminating the plastic. When you're taking your showers, how long do you stay in there? I've got a couple of nephews. They've got some kind of music gizmo. They have playing music while they're showering. I'm saying, they groan when I say, hey, come on, cut back.
That seems dangerous, listening to music in the shower.
Well, it must be set up some way that you don't get a shock with it.
Crazy gizmos. Carry on.
Also, how do you use water when you're preparing your vegetables? Do you let the water run? You just dab your lettuce underneath? Bad. Food preparation. Laundry. Do you wash your laundry when you have 3 towels in it instead of waiting till you get a load? Power lights on. Are they on every place that looks like a hotel? And also the furnace. Shorts are not necessary in winter. Wear longer pants and an extra sweater. Keep the heat down. Now, these are all technical, economic things, but if you look at them with a heart. They are gifts given. How am I using them? The earth doesn't need us. The sun doesn't need us. And then lastly, or the church, that we encourage that our churches to have a prayer intention, to keep it in our consciousness. So we're slowly wanting to make this shift from the earth not as an object, but something sacred to be respected. And then also when you have your social gatherings, glass dishes, please, no styrofoam that pollutes and chokes out the earth. Plastic paper and plastic forks, all of these are things that we can do away with. It means taking more time, washing the dishes, but it's communication time, it's socializing time. We can think of that way. Is that enough?
It was enough. I'm going to offer one last quote here. I'm going to read it.
Yes.
We'll let you comment on it. It'll sort of ties up everything we've been talking about, and then we'll go quickly to a couple of questions for Q&R. But Chief Seattle pulls it together for us this morning by saying this: teach your children what we have taught our children, that the earth is our mother. Whatever befalls the earth befalls the sons and daughters of the earth. If men spit upon the ground, they spit upon themselves. This we know. The earth does not belong to us. We belong to the earth. This we know. All things are connected like the blood which unites one family. All things are connected. Whatever befalls the earth befalls the sons and daughters of the earth. We did not weave the web of life. We are merely a strand in it. Whatever we do to the web, we do to ourselves. One final comment.
Yes, that's Chief Seattle, and he said that in 1854, long before the new science was emerged. Look how they, like a mystic, grasped the oneness of God and the specialness of us as community. And what I like about it is he says, we humans think we've been on the top of the chain for the longest time. He says, we humans are part of this web of life. We're merely a strand in it. We need the community of the natural world with us. So happy tripping and enjoying the natural world, God's blessings and gift to us.
Before we hit the Q&R, can you give it up for Sister Judy this morning? Thank you for sharing with us. So good. So good. So good.
Thank you.
Are you ready for some questions?
Sure.
All right. They're fairly nice people, but we'll see how things turn out, okay? Here we go. Does the Bible not suggest a 7-day creation story, and the genealogies teach us that the earth is 6,000 years old?
Mm-hmm. This is a question that's asked a lot. And what I would like to say is that, and I checked with theologians and was affirmed, that 7 days was a metaphor. The Hebrew people gathered around the campfire and tried to make sense of God's creation. And so for them, it was a period of time. And so it's simply a metaphor to say that God's unfolding happened. In the 7 it means the fullness of time. In the fullness of time, God's creation is revealed. And we see it's growing in complexity. And regarding the 6,000 years, again, their understanding is what they grasp, but we now have science that tell us a little more. So are we going to believe like Copernicus, before Copernicus, that we only were one earth? Or do we see the expansiveness and the surprise of God? And I hope that all throughout this, you're going to say, hey, my image of God is expanding, growing. Ultimate mystery that our Creator God could unfold this, and that scientists have given us a grasp of it. Beautiful.
It is. And we've talked about that creation story in those ways here before, where the opening of Genesis is a poem. It's not written as if it's a science textbook saying this is exactly how everything happened and when. It's more of a revelation of who's behind all of this, who's put this together, and how much we're loved. Very good. Ready for one more?
Sure.
It's going to be a hard one, though, I think. Here it is. Whoa, that's how hard it was.
Hard.
Let's try it again. Here we go. One more time. There it is. Is a malaria-carrying mosquito or an Ebola virus truly full of God? How are we to understand that?
Ouch, I don't know. Maybe they bit something else that caused it. You know, that was one of the things prior. They say for about the first 1,500 years, people had a sense of the sacred and connection with creation. But along came the Black Death. The fleas were around, and they bit into different things, and their combination of blood created something disastrous when it hit the human, and they died. And 1/3 of Europe was wiped out. So that's when they began to think, hey, maybe the earth isn't God's sacred revelation. And Thomas Berry said, They were not aware of germs and hygiene and things like of this nature as we are today. So maybe they were infected.
Maybe they were. And I think that speaks back to a question we actually had in the first service about how, violence shows up in creation. Lions have sharp teeth for a reason. So how does that work into the creation story? Because you give a brilliant answer. Do you remember what you said an hour ago? Because it was really
Well,
good.
I was using the image that there is suffering and toughness, and whenever there's birthing, a woman, when she's giving birth to a child, there's all kinds of pain and suffering that goes on in the natural world too. When the puppies arrive, or a cow with its calf, that's the natural rhythm, that there's going to be suffering and life. And there'll be death and life, but it's not either or.
Can we thank Sister Judy just one more time? Thank you, my friend.